Okay, we're going to have a look at putting some color onto scanned images using Photoshop. So this is a picture that I've drawn in 1 point perspective. You can see on the picture there's still some pencil lines and things on there. So I drew it in pencil and then I inked it in using a technical pen. But what I want to do now is I want to clean it up and then I want to be able to put some color in using Photoshop. So if I use the zoom tool, which is something I'm going to be using a lot, zoom in on any particular area. So I go by the side of this sofa here. Now remember, if you hold down the shift bar, you get the little hand so you can move around in position. So I'm switching between shift bar to move my page and the zoom control to actually get in on it. Now you can see these pencil lines, they're the things I want to get rid of. So I'm going to basically choose a paintbrush, but I'm also going to choose the paint color. So I'm going to go down here to the foreground color, click on it. This opens up my color picker, and all I'm going to do is click on the page where it's white. So I'm picking up the same color of white as the back of the page. So now all I've got to do is use my paintbrush and I can go over and I can get rid of these pencil lines. Now the paintbrush itself, if I use my square brackets, I can make my paintbrush bigger or smaller. So depending upon the size of the area that I actually want to clean up, sometimes I can do it using a zoom, sometimes I have to make my paintbrush bigger. You soon get used to how it works. So you tidy up in this manner, and then you basically just move around and do all the various bits to keep it tidy. Once you've got it tidy, save it with a new name. Now what the best thing to do is for your designs, you can then have different versions that have got different colors on them. And that's what we're going to look at next. So I'm just going to switch over to one that's already tidied up. So this is my tidied up version. I've removed all of those pencil marks. So I've just got the actual design of what I want to do. I want to start adding color to these things now. So I'm going to show you a few ways of doing that, a few different tools. I'm using a mouse at the moment, but it's just as easy and sometimes easier to use the Wacom tablet to do this. But I'm going to show it to you in a few steps. So first of all, these windows. If I decided I wanted to put a color inside those windows, I could actually put a picture behind there. But if I want to fill it in to a particular color, like light blue or something, it's not a square, it's actually a rectangular type shape, but it's on a 1 point perspective. So I'm going to zoom in on it first of all, as I've done before. So I'm going to grab my zoom tool and I can click to zoom in, or I can drag around the area, but I'll take it as big as I can on the screen to make this easier to see. And what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to go from corner to corner and basically create a selection. So I'm going to use a selection tool up here. I've got lots to choose from, but I'm going to go for this one, polygonal lasso tool. You can see it changes the icon, and I'm just going to click at the starting point, which is here. I'm going to click again on this corner, and I'm going to go round. I'm doing this very quickly. You can take more time, and you can see as I move up here, where the beginning and the end come together, there's a little circle appears onto my pointer. When I click now, it creates a joined up selection. So these things here are called the marching ants. You can see the dotted line. Now that means that whatever I do in this area will only happen in that area. However, what I want to do before I do that is I don't want to draw on the same background layer. So I'm going to create a new layer. And this layer now I'm going to call window. So I'm in my Windows layers and I've given it a new name, and I've got to make sure that I'm going to use the correct one. So at the moment this is the background layer selected, this is the Windows layer selected, so whatever I do now is going to be on this one. Okay, I've still got my selection in place, and I'm going to choose again my paintbrush. So here's my paintbrush, but I'm going to choose a different color. So I'm going to go to my paint picker. I'm not going to go for the standard ones here. I'm going to use the color libraries because they're good. This is the Pantone library that I've chosen, which is I particularly like, and I'm going to find some light blues. And I've got a whole range of them, but I'm just going to go for a basic one like this one. I'm going to say OK. Now before I start painting, up here I've got what's called the opacity control. If I do it on 100%, and I'll show it to you on 100%, it's completely dark. If I change the opacity and I make it say 50, now if I do it, it's a lighter colour. But if I go over it a second time, you can see it adds colour to it. So when you have a different opacity setting, it means that you can actually do tonal shading using these brushes. That's what we're going to be able to do, and I'll show you that in a moment. But before we do that, I want to get rid of these ones. So the easiest way of doing that is to go back into my history. I haven't saved yet, so in my history panel I can step back through the things I've done. So I'm going to go back to the point where I haven't done any of that at all, and this time, now with my opacity set to 50, I'm going to fill in this whole area. Now, one thing that I will tell you, I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger. I could make my brush big enough to cover the whole thing. I'm not going to. When I hold down my mouse button, which I'm doing at the moment, I'm keeping my mouse button held down, and it's given an even colour because it's doing it all in one go. So even if I don't fill it in one go, now I've let go. However, if I did that in a series of goes, instead of keeping my mouse button down, so each one of these is going to be a separate one, you can see that it's really hard to get an even colour then. So you're better off keeping your brush button, keeping your left mouse button held down, so that you actually get one even colour if that's what you want to do. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my layers. I'm going to create myself a new layer. So I'm going to make another one. This one I'm going to call furniture, and on this layer I'm going to colour my furniture. So the first one I'm going to find, in fact before I do that I'm going to deselect this, so I'm going to do Control and D, that deselects. So now my marching ants have gone. If I painted now it would go anywhere on the page. I don't want to do that. I want to move, and I want to find, say, one of these stools. They'll be a good example. So there's a stool. I want to show you how to shade that stool. I'm going to zoom in on it even more. I'm going to drag around it, make it nice and big. The bigger these things are, the easier they are to work on. Okay, now this is quite an irregular shape to do selection on. So you could just draw freehand on here, but it's harder to do. I like to select things. So I'm going to go back up to my selection tools. This time I'm going to choose this one called Magnetic Lasso Tool. And with this one, on the inside of my circle, I'm just going to click, and the magnetic part will cling to the points that are closest to where I'm actually clicking. I'm doing this very quickly, but you've got to remember this is on a really zoomed in scale now. There we go. You can see that point where it joins up again. So there's that selection. Now my lightest surface will be my top one. So I'm going to make this a fairly light colour, but I'm not going to make it this blue. I'm going to go for a different colour. I'm going to go for a kind of purpley colour maybe. So I'm going to go for quite a light pinkish colour. I'm going to select my brush again. My brush is massive, that's okay. I'm going to go over in one go. There's the top surface. I'm going to do Control and D to deselect. So remember, I'm still on my furniture layer at the moment now, and I'm going to select again. This time I'm going to select the body of it. So I'm going to use the same tool for now. I'm going to use my Magnetic Lasso tool. If I drag it, it'll try and cling for me. I don't have to click every time. I can just let it see the shape that it adapts to itself. Now I'm not clicking, it's just magnetically attaching itself to those points. But whenever I feel I need to click, I can click. Make sure it does get all the bits in I want it to get in. And again, when I get to the top there, I join them up. So this time I want to be able to have a kind of more of a streaky effect, because if I'm imagine the light is hitting on the front here, it's going to be darker on the edges. I'm going to just zoom out ever so slightly. So I'm going to go back to my zoom tool. If I hold down Alt, you can see it turns to a minus instead of a plus. So when Alt is held down, I'm going to click and just zoom out slightly. Maybe not as much as that. There we go, like that. Position this a bit more centrally. So I'm going to go for my brush again. This time I want a smaller brush. So I'm going to bring that down to a smaller size. And I'm just going to give it one coat first of all. And it doesn't matter what direction I go in. I can go in any direction when I'm just doing a base colour. But now I've done the base colour, I want to add some darker bits to it. So I'm going to go a bit smaller again, and I'm going to get a streaking effect. I'm going to bring this in, and every time I let go of my mouse and do a bit more, it gets a little bit darker. Now the whole idea is to do some tonal shading. Now you might even decide that to make it look even more realistic, you change the colour slightly. So I'm going to go back to my Pantone library, and I'm just going to go for 2 shades darker of the same colour. This time you'll see now that it's putting a much darker edge to that thing. And you can use purple with most colours to actually make it darker. It doesn't even have to be a purple design. If this was a blue one, you could still put purple over to make it darker. So that's that one done. I'm going to do Control and D, and if I just want to see the thing on normal scale, I can double click. And in fact, I'm going to zoom out a lot more so you can see what that looks like. So that's the shape starting to come together. Now the interesting thing about layers is if you turn a layer off, you lose the color. So if I turn those two off, I'm back to my starting point. So you could actually have more than one layer for different things. So I could have 3 different Windows layers and have windows in different colors just to see what they look like. Because remember, until I get to the end and I save this as a JPEG image, I can continue to manipulate it. At the moment I haven't saved this at all, but what I should be doing is saving this as a PSD file, as a Photoshop file. So I'm just going to call this room demo. I'm just going to save it on my desktop for now, but you can see here this is a Photoshop file. So all this information about layers and things like that, it keeps. But when I turn this into a JPEG image, it loses all that and just turns it into a flat image like a photograph. Okay, last thing I'm going to show you is how you can have some areas selected and other areas not selected. So I'm going to zoom in on this back wall. Okay, there's my back wall. I'm going to create a new layer and I'm going to call this one back wall. Now the more layers the better, because it means if things go wrong you can only have to edit a certain amount. If you do everything on one layer and then you mess something up, you've messed up the whole piece of your work really. So first off I'm going to use my polygonal lasso tool and I'm going to select this back wall. Same thing, join up. So that's that whole area selected. However, inside this area there are other areas that I don't want to have paint go into. So these 2 doors for instance, I'm going to now hold down the Alt button and you'll see that that turns into a minus again, and on the minus I'm going to select this door area, and I'm doing this quite quickly, you can take more care of yours. Joins up, so that's now deselected. So I've selected the big area but said this door's not part of that selection. I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to put my Alt button down so I get the minus selection icon, and I'm going to go around this door, join it up, and I'm going to do the same thing for this window area. Well, in fact it's not the window, I think this is the little room where the chefs are cooking out the back. So now if I choose to actually put some paint on, so I'm going to go for a different color altogether. I'll go for a sort of bluish color now. Maybe I'll go for a jadey kind of color. There we go. There's my color. I'm still on when I go with my paintbrush, I'm still on my 50% opacity. My brush size is too small. I'll make my brush size bigger. But now, if I hold I'm still holding my mouse button down so I get an even spread of color. Yeah, remember, as long as I keep my mouse button held down, it all will stay the same. But even though I'm doing this roughly, it's only putting the color where I want it to go. Okay, let go. I'm going to do Control and D to deselect, and I'm going to zoom back out using the Alt, and you can see now that I've got that back wall done again. So in the same way, if I take the little eye off, I can see it in different ways. And that's basically a really good way of using Photoshop to add color to things. Good luck.